It is awesome to think of how our lives intersect with people at the right time and the right way, isn't it? It's just awesome. And although my talk is titled, Receive the Gift of Wisdom, that's not where we start. That's where we'll wind up. But when I was preparing this talk, I had the most beautiful image come to me. And it was ribbons of light in the darkness. Isn't that an interesting in sync? Because I didn't even know that was what we're going to be doing for our adventures in faith. So what is that image? It's a stunning image if you can just contemplate it with me for a moment. Just feeling these ribbons of light in the darkness, which cause us to ask ourselves, what is the darkness and what is the light? Well, perhaps your conversations throughout the last couple of years will reflect the darkness. We can recognize the pandemic continues. The women's rights are being challenged. Divisiveness within our nation and throughout the world. Climate change looms over our future, and our young people are filled with anxiety and depression in a way that they hadn't been before. So we know that there is darkness, but there is also light. And I was remembering as we were talking among ourselves over coffee one day, that even though we have the darkness of our own times, there is darkness that has existed throughout the history of philosophy, and yet what has been brought forth is light and wisdom, like the lotus that emerges from the mud. There is light that emerges in the darkness. And so these ribbons of light, I thought, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful to share from the history of philosophy what those light ribbons are, and then see how we can apply them. And then I thought, this is not just about sharing the wisdom with other people. This is my own story, which I haven't really spoken about much in public, but my story has begun with these ribbons of light. There was a time in my earlier years where I experienced the darkness as the death of my father. I was 21. We were very close. He had introduced me to some of the great world of philosophy. How perfect is that, to have a daughter who's interested in philosophy and then a father who's interested in philosophy. It's just amazing. So when he passed, I felt bereft. I felt tremendous grief. I felt the emptiness. I was in the darkness. And what happened was, he had a friend who he had introduced me to before. His name is Dr. Michael Manns. And he was my father's friend and mentor, a chiropractor, but also a philosopher in his own right. And he said to me, when my father died, in a way to honor my friendship with your father, I am here to help you in any way that I can. Now, it's as if the universe created a link to this man who, if you knew of him, he spoke in a heavy Greek accent. He was from Crete. We were all in New York City together. And it was as if he was a character walking out of ancient Greece and being my mentor. And he was the one who shared with me a thread of philosophy that is applied to everyday life. And he was also the same person that introduced me to the science of mind, upon which much of our philosophy is based. This philosophical tradition that applies wisdom in everyday life. So it's an amazing synchronicity that we're here together when this has been the path that has lit my way for the last 40 years. So I know it's wonderful, I know it works, and I'm here to share it with you. So our first ribbon of light comes from Plotinus. And this was also an influential figure that influenced Ernest Holmes. And Plotinus was a 3rd century philosopher, one of the most influential philosophers after Plato and Aristotle. And he really brought some of their philosophies through the ages so they wouldn't be lost. And the essence of Plotinus's philosophy is that we are one with the one. This is our birthright to realize our oneness. And that once we tap into this oneness, once we tap into what he called the radiance of the soul, we will be changed and transformed. And one of the ways that we are going to be changed and transformed is that we will have that light regardless of circumstances, that we will be in touch with all the qualities of radiance, of love, of wholeness, in the midst of these difficulties that we share. And he had a useful concept. He said, human beings are like amphibians, able to live like the amphibian does in the water and on land. We as amphibians are able to live on the earth, in the physical realm, and in the invisible realm of spirit. This is our capacity. And he would be speaking as he had this community in Alexandria and in Rome. And he would be teaching this philosophy about, he called it the sage who has reached this contact with the one. And his students would challenge him. What do you mean this is able to be transformed regardless of circumstances? They said, but what if he be captured? What if he be given drugs? What if his children are dragged away in front of him? Or her? How could that happen? How could they still maintain that? And he said very beautifully, 1,000 mischances and disappointments may befall the sage and leave him still or her still in tranquil possession of the radiance of the soul. There is always the radiance in the inner soul, untroubled, like the light in a lantern when fierce gusts beat about in storm and tempest. The light does not go out. And he said to us, this is our inheritance. This is what is available to us. And so the first ribbon of light encourages us to turn within and contemplate this power of God, this power of light, this power of the universe that we are one with. And once we have it, our life is lit and the radiance prepares the way. So that is one ribbon of light. The second ribbon of light that I'd like to talk about is in the philosophy of Epicurus. Now, Epicurus had this radical idea that was misunderstood during his time as well as our own. And he said that pleasure is the greatest good of life. And I remember how different the sayings of antiquity were to the ones that I was experiencing in graduate school when I was in New York City. So in the Delphic Oracle, the sayings of the time were, know thyself and nothing in excess. And when I would walk to my classes in the village in New York City, there was a banner across a country western bar that said, too much ain't enough. And so it's such a different idea of pleasure. Instead of the man who goes to a bar and sees a banner, another banner that says, all you can drink for $1, he says, I'll take 2. Because our first understanding of pleasure is that it's unbridled desire being fulfilled. But Epicurus said, pleasure is health of the body and peace of mind. Choose that. Whatever it is that you can do to choose that. But I remember Dr. Manns once said to me, you know, we raise this question, what is the purpose of life? And Epicurus says that the greatest pleasure of life is to enjoy it. And so how many of us do our to-do list for the day and put on the top of the list, enjoy today? It's not, I did it this morning just because I wanted to be true to my learning about this. But it's such a great reminder, isn't it? Enjoy life. And let that be something that we allow ourselves to enjoy. So the second ribbon of light reminds us that we're here to enjoy life. And one of the things that helps us enjoy life is a beautiful quote here from Epicurus about the power of friendship. Of all the means to ensure happiness throughout the whole life, by far the most important is the acquisition of friends. Of all the gifts the wise providence grants us to make life full and happy, friendship is the most beautiful. And even though he had written about 300 different pieces of philosophical literature, we have 3 letters and a few of his sayings that are so rich, but just a fraction. And one of them is a letter to his student, how he lays out his philosophy. And he starts with this saying, even though I am ill in the body and I can hardly stand the pain, I am lifted by the thought of my contact with you and what it is that we share together. So he was living this philosophy. And he gives us this reminder that the second ribbon of light is to remember friendship, to remember to enjoy life, that is part of the light that we can take into the darkness. And then the third one is Epictetus. Their names sound similar, but Epictetus is a philosopher who was the founder of Stoicism, or one of the main proponents of Stoicism. And in Stoicism, Epictetus himself was born a slave, and yet his philosophy proclaimed that we can be free, that no matter what our circumstances, we have the freedom to know what is in our power and what is beyond our power. And so we have to leave the things that are beyond our power and only pay attention to what is in our power. And what is in our power? The ability to have ideas, the ability to have an attitude. We are not disturbed by things, Epictetus says, but our views of things. How science of mind does that sound? And that it is difficulties that show people's character. So the Stoics thought that life was like in training as a warrior, as a soldier. So you learned philosophy in order to, when you had a certain circumstance, you would use that attitude and that composure to meet that circumstance. And when it became something that was your challenge, you say to the challenge, this is what I've prepared for. This is the time that I have prepared my resources to meet this challenge, and that we are free to do that. Now, I'll tell you an example of this. We were once on vacation in the south of France, renting a boat, and each of us on the boat had a job. And mine was, when we got to the levees or the locks, we had to jump off the boat, tie it up, and then wait for the water to rise. So my job was to get off the boat and tie it around the stanchion, whatever it was. Except I was so eager to do it well that I jumped too soon. And I landed on my right ankle too hard. But when I did land, what came to my mind? Epictetus is right. I can't control redoing this jump. I can't control that this has happened. But what I can control is how I look at it. And I had to work really hard because my mind kept wanting to go back to redoing the jump. If only I could redo it, but we can't go back in time. But what we could do is change our attitude. So I was working hard and saying, well, at least I'm in the boat to recuperate. And I'm in the south of France, I might as well enjoy that. I mean, how much of a blessing it was that one of the people who was on the boat was a doctor who had to leave, which was very helpful. And I couldn't do my usual job, but I could cook. So I would stand there in the galley with one foot up. And we had a good time. We had a good trip. So this, whatever our challenge is, can take us in that right direction. So our third ribbon of light allows us to remember that we are free, that we can have this state that was prized in antiquity called ataraxia, or peace of mind. And interestingly, one of the first tranquilizers was called Atarax, kind of based on this. So we are free. That circumstances call forth our resources and show our character. Third ribbon of light. And the last one I'd like to share is from Boethius, who was a wrote in the Middle Ages. And his circumstance, he said, changed. He was a statesman and philosopher. He was wealthy. He had a political position. He was on the top of his game until the wheel of fortune turned. And he was accused falsely of trying to overturn the government, that he was being accused of treason. But he wasn't, he said he's innocent. So he's in his prison cell, and this female figure comes to him, and she calls herself Philosophy. And she tells him that he's been looking at the wrong things, that what he needs to do is to turn his attention away from his circumstances, away from the fleeting changes of wealth and power, and focus on the love of wisdom and the love of God, because that will be where his true value lies. So our fourth ribbon of light helps us know that even in the darkest moments, we can shift our attention from the circumstance of fortune, knowing that it will change from time to time, but we have something now to focus on. In prayer, in contemplation, the love of God, the love of wisdom. I remember that Bible phrase, keep thine eye single, and thy whole body will be filled with light. And I think that that's this message that's running through some of these ribbons of light, that we, in our ability to have one foot in the physical and one foot in the spiritual, is powerful, and that we have that ability to know both of these simultaneously. It's only from the perspective of multiplicity that we see that there is this one foot on the ground and one foot in the spiritual. But this is available to us when we need it. So now we have these ribbons of light that we tie together and receive the gift of wisdom. These are making a gift. And as Dr. Manns told me every time that I saw him for over a period of 10 years, what it is that we have to do with philosophy, how wisdom becomes the gift of our lives, is that we go beyond knowing what this is to practicing what this is. So the gift of wisdom needs to be applied. We have to live this in our lives. We have to apply it in our lives, and that's when we get the gift of transformation. So Plotinus's last thought, this is not a journey for the feet that brings us from land to land, nor need you think of coach or ship to carry you away. All this you must set aside and refuse to see. But instead, close your eyes and call instead upon another vision, which is within you, a vision, the birthright of all, which few turn to see. So we are the light. Once we are in touch with that radiance of the soul, then we can be the light bearers in the times of darkness. And even though in Plotinus's times only a few claimed their birthright, I believe we've made progress. And the way we can ensure that progress is that we live it ourselves and be the light bearers in our times of darkness. Thank you so much.